Hey, Piseth.
What's up, Eli?
Hey, welcome. Good evening for you over there.
Yeah, that it is.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good. Yep.
Great.
I think you got a couple of tats since last time I chatted with you.
I think I did. Therapy.
Nice.
Hi, Simone.
Well, we've got a bunch of people that have already joined us. I'm going to spend a couple of moments doing a quick intro, and then I'll turn the time over to you. Also, I'm happy to help you manage the Q&A portions, so you don't have to worry about that part. You just let me know when you want to turn some time over to Q&A, and I'll help out. Cool?
Okay. Yeah, will you be able to share my screen also? Do you have that ability?
I'm going to give you that opportunity now. So you'll be able to take over and share your screen.
Great.
Cool. Awesome. Well, let me jump into the intro. First off, just again, reminding everyone that the clinic today is Hips, the Epicenter of Movement by Piseth. My name's Eli Kerr. I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders of Gnarly Nutrition, and I get to join and do the intro for clinic today and hang out. Actually, Piseth did a clinic like this, I don't know, maybe it was 2 months ago, and I missed it, and I'm super stoked to actually participate in this because I have some major hip issues. For those of you who haven't joined us in the clinics yet, I just want you to know kind of a quick rundown on who Gnarly Nutrition is. We offer a full line of all natural sports nutrition products that are NSF for sports certified. And we design products for athletes who care about what goes inside their bodies. We pride ourselves on offering clean, natural products that taste delicious. And any of you who have tried our products, I hope that you feel that same way. Also, if this is the first time you've joined a clinic, then we want to make sure that you know that we have other clinics that are going to be happening over the next 2 months, all the way until the first week of January. All of these clinics are really focused on preventing injuries, dealing with injuries, and kind of recovery tips in general. And just different topics from experts that are focused on baseline health and nutrition. And we're calling this whole kind of clinic workshop webinars longevity in sport. So really designed to help us spend more days doing the stuff we love and less days sidelined. During this time, we've also launched a new product called Gnarly Collagen Pro, which really is just focused on helping to prevent injury and repair, tendons, ligaments, and general joint injuries. Again, fits really naturally into this theme of longevity in sports. Following this clinic, you'll receive an email with the recording of Piseth's clinic, and you'll also get an opportunity to try out Gnarly Collagen Pro at a discount, along with another free gift that will be offered in there. We also have a big giveaway that starts in a week, actually, November 30th. So if you follow us on Gnarly Nutrition or sign up for our newsletter, then you'll be getting updates on the launch of that giveaway, and you can participate in that. Also, we hope that if you enjoy this clinic, that you'll take a screenshot, grab a phrase or something that Piseth teaches you tonight that you want to share with others, and that you'll post it on the socials, tag Gnarly and tag Piseth, so that you can let other people know about the great content that we're providing right now, and also, introduce them to Piseth and the services that she provides. Also, at the end of this clinic, you'll receive the opportunity to just fill out a short survey. It just takes a minute, and it provides some feedback for us, as well as, you know, what you loved about the presentation, and we'll pass that on to Piseth as well. Last of all, I just want to point out that down at the bottom of your screen, there's a place to make comments. You can make general comments that everybody will see, and then you can also, there's a Q&A button. Any questions that you have for Piseth that you would like her to answer, can you please ask them through the Q&A button, and that's where we will manage the questions. That's pretty much all I have. So again, this is the clinic hips, the epicenter of movement. And in this clinic, we're going to be discussing the hips and how they connect to the body as a whole. Often overlooked, our hips have a wide-ranging impact and can cause both basic and complex complaints, from low back pain to rib cage stiffness to both hamstring and shoulder pulls. So hopefully you brought a tennis ball today or a foam roller, and Piseth's going to walk us through some tips on how to take care of our hips. So lastly, I just want to introduce Piseth. She's a gnarly athlete. She's also a personal trainer. Piseth is a gnarly athlete. There's also a personal trainer, licensed massage therapist, and therapeutic cupping practitioner who specializes in human structural integrity. Simply put, they look at how the body works as an entire complete system, and they've helped hundreds of clients not just improve their overall health and well-being, but navigate through acute and chronic injuries ranging in cause from extreme sports to extreme inactivity. Their goal is to empower their clients and educate all folks on how to take optimal care of the awesome vehicle that is the human body. Turn the time over to you, Piseth, and I'm going to just kind of dissolve into the background. If you need anything, I'll be hanging out.
Rad, thanks for the intro, Eli, and welcome to the clinic, everyone. I'm stoked to have you. Like Eli had mentioned earlier, hips are really the epicenter of movement. They control your upper body and your lower body. So we'll get a little topo. Consider this your topo of the human hips. It's helpful to understand how the hips function by having a visual and seeing what are the hips. So we'll start with that. Eli, if you could I don't see the share screen option on my end. If you could do that for me, that would be amazing.
Piseth, it's not showing up. It's not showing up down at the bottom.
Start share. How about here? No, it's not showing up at the bottom there. There we go. I think this should be it.
Try that again. Sorry about that.
It says I can't do it unless I quit my screen. There we go. Beautiful. All right, can you guys see what's happening here? Cool. Give me a thumbs up if you can see. If you can't, then no, don't want that.
We can see it.
Okay, cool. All right, so hips. Sorry about that tech difficulty. The epicenter of movement. We'll start off with this graphic here. As you can see, the hips really do connect the upper body into the lower body. So you can see that the hips are here in the middle, you got your spine going up, and then you got your legs going down. Without the hips, none of this movement would be possible. All right. How do I open this so we get it bigger? All right. All right, so we'll start with the bones. There's 3 bones that make up the hips. You got the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. So this is the top of your hips here, right? And this is down where your butt bone connects into your hamstrings. So that's looking from the top down. And here we have a side view, okay? Looking at that same thing from the side, we start to connect the upper body or the spine at the top, and then you see how the femoral head or the top of your leg inserts into that socket there on the side. I like this little GIF because it shows the 360, really easy to identify the hips there. Moving on to muscle tissue. The iliopsoas, I think some of you might have heard of the psoas. It's now becoming more common knowledge that the psoas is a major hip flexor. So it means that it brings your hips forward and it reflexes or helps you curl, okay? This is one of the first muscles that develops in the human body, and it helps you roll into the fetal position. We'll go here. And as you can see, it's actually the only muscle that connects the upper body into the lower body. Every other muscle kind of makes a pit stop in the hips and then is joined by some other muscle. The iliopsoas is the only muscle that goes from your low back, so that's part of your spine, through your hips. You can see how it weaves through the hips and then goes into the lesser trochanter, so basically the inside of your groin. All right. So connecting the psoas to the diaphragm, how does your hip affect your breathing? Well, it's actually directly connected through fascia and the medial arcuate ligament. So this tiny, very powerful ligament. With each breath that you take, the psoas and the diaphragm work together to provide spinal stability in the front of your spine. And as you can see, the diaphragm and the psoas react to fear and to stress with constriction. Now that's important because what we don't think about is how much stress we actually are under constantly when our eyes intake that data or intake information that goes right through your spine, and then your brain is this amazing plexus of neurons that produces a ton of chemicals. It's the ultimate drug machine on the face of this earth. So it makes hormones to then make your body react. We might not be in tune with that part and understand how much cortisol is actually being produced by our brain, going through our spinal cord and affecting our muscles. Here we're looking at the back, the erector spinae. These are actually core muscles and also known as postural muscles. The important thing about this is that postural muscles have a really hard time resting, right? They're there to help us maintain posture. They're there to help us literally stand up straight. So they take a pretty heavy load, and it's really difficult to get them to relax or to sleep. Again, another cool GIF. You know, I love some GIFs. Okay, moving south. So going back down towards your feet, we have an anterior view or a front view of the psoas, the iliacus, and then your quad muscle. So your quad that attaches the front of your hip, into the front of your knees or the inside of your knees. So now we're moving south. Here's a better, better graphic. And you can see how many stabilizers and how many muscles are attached to the inside there. All right, looking at the glutes. So now we're looking at the back of the hips. We just went from the front. So now we're looking at the back of the hips. This is the sacrum or the butt bone. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. And you can see how the glute max attaches all along the iliac crest here. So that's a lot of surface area that that muscle controls. And glutes and legs, they're basically your tanks, right? The way that they're built, the way that, you know, they're designed is to take a heavy load. I mean, these are your, you know, your trucks. You can go forever with strong glutes and strong legs. But it also means it's really hard to get them to relax and chill. So going from the back into a side view, you'll see the tensor fascial latte. It's not a Starbucks drink. It's actually how your IT band is attached into the side of your hip. So all my runners who have really tight IT bands and you're sitting there foam rolling the side of your leg or hammering into your IT band, it's not gonna let go because the tensor fascial latte is holding that tension. Okay, we'll learn later how to release that. All right, this is a terrible graphic, so my apologies. But this kind of shows you what happens when the hips tilt forward, right? That's called an anterior tilt. When your hips go forward, the way that our skeleton stacks up, the knee starts to buckle in, the leg internally rotates, and then you have overpronation of the foot. So everything kind of collapses down. Where if you have a posterior tilt, you have the opposite problem. There's too much tension in the back of the line. And here are some terrible postures. Okay, these are common posture types. You have the sway back, which puts excessive strain on the low back here. That's a posterior tilt of the pelvis. The lumbar lordosis, so that puts pressure into the low back by compacting those discs. That's an anterior tilt or a forward tilt. Thoracic kyphosis, so rounding of the top of the back, and then forward head posture. Good posture is somewhere in between all of that. You want to basically stack everything up in the middle to line up, and that looks different on everyone. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of the anatomy of the hips, I want to go into the tissue, the actual muscle tissue. I think something that's often overlooked is healthy tissue versus unhealthy tissue. What does that even mean? Like, why should I care if my tissue is healthy or not? So if we're talking about performance, we're talking about efficient movement or efficient force distribution throughout the body, right? It's about generating power, moving it through your body, and then producing force to either move an object or pick something up or move yourself. If we have healthy fascia, like you see here, that energy distribution is smooth. The communication through the body goes really easily without anything getting in the way. So you're actually more effective. You use less energy to produce a great amount of force. Whereas if you have unhealthy fascia, you can see how it's a bit of a cluster mess here, right? So think about information going through that cluster. You're going to have to use more energy to produce force, and it's just not going to go into the direction that you want to actually push it. So that's the difference between healthy fascia and unhealthy fascia. Now it is pronounced fascia, but I think it's so pretentious that I intentionally mispronounce it all the time. I know I might get reamed for that, but I don't care. Okay. All right. Now looking at healthy tissue versus injured tissue versus scar tissue. Healthy tissue, again, information being distributed through your body really efficiently and effectively. Everything runs smoothly. When you get injured and there's strained tissue, right? It goes from something like this to like this, a jumbled mess, okay? It doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. You can do stuff to fix the jumbled mess or to break up that scar tissue. The sooner you address something, the less likely it's going to be that that your body will take a compensation pattern or move around the pain, if you will. This is what happens with improperly healed scar tissue. Right? Big cluster, the function of the muscle goes down, the risk of re-injury increases. So for all the folks that, like, I don't know, misstep or they pull something, the interesting thing about getting injured is that humans react in a really strange way. We become embarrassed, right? We become embarrassed, like somehow this accident was our fault, but it's an accident. And if you know anything about like human physiology, the hormones that get produced, cortisol, neuroepinephrine, stress gets put into your body and it constricts that muscle tissue, right? It locks that up, and it could be locked long, it could be locked short, it varies. Having a hug after you hurt yourself is not just like nice emotionally, but it actually does help you recover from that injury better, because the oxytocin that's produced from that hug, right, sedates your nervous system and allows that muscle to then recover. So next time, if you see somebody get hurt and we're not dealing with COVID, offering a hug is a really nice thing. I highly, highly suggest it. Like when your mom hugs you, if you scrape your knee or like bump something, that's what makes you more resilient, is having that immediate like oxytocin release to counter the effects of the stress hormones. Okay, let's get out of here. All right, so now that we've covered the hips, the anatomy of the hips, the function of the hips, and poor posture, what do you do about all of this, right? What do you do when your hips are totally screwed up? This is a model of ideal hips. No one's hips look like this. We all would dream of having hips like this, right? But with modern life, you're sitting a lot, so your hips are usually flexed, and that creates what is called compromised muscle integrity. Okay, it just means that your muscles are confused. If you continue to use something a certain way, it drills that memory into the muscle tissue. Your body adapts to how you use it. So if you end up sitting for a long period of time and you're in front of a computer and that data is coming into your eyes, going down your spinal cord, flexing your hips without you even knowing it. In our primitive days, if we experienced that kind of stress, it was usually because we were running away from something that was trying to eat us. So that the running would produce sedative hormones and then counter the effects of that hip flexion. But in modern life, we don't do that anymore. So if your hips are screwed up, right? If you've got excessive external rotation, internal rotation, or some kind of torque like this, you can see how it affects your sacrum and then into your low back. So this is the portion where we go over how to release your hips. Muscles love being hugged, okay? If they're tight, you don't want to stretch them. So the big misconception with tight muscles is like, ooh, I really want to pull it, I really want to stretch it out. That's counterintuitive. You actually want to hug it so you can compress and bring the two ends closer together. That way it creates slack and it can actually let go and release, and then you want to stretch it. So we're gonna go into some compressions with the foam roller and a tennis ball to target the common areas in the hip. And then we'll go into some stretches. So if you have a tennis ball and a foam roller handy, I would recommend grabbing those things right now, and we'll hit the floor, okay? All right. I think people hate on the foam roller because they don't actually know how to use it properly. You can't release tissue by powering your way into the tissue. Muscles don't work like that. They don't like when you push into them aggressively. Your breath is how you activate your nervous system to then produce those hormones to allow your muscle tissue to react. Because the pain isn't in your tissue, the pain's up here, right? So we have to change the relationship the brain has with your body, okay? The foam roller, consider the foam roller your Swedish massage. It's superficial. It takes care of the fascia on the outside. The cool thing about fascia is that it acts very similar to plastic, right? If you stretch it, it stays stretched. Whereas muscle tissue, if you stretch it, it'll snap right back. So we'll start with the foam roller and getting the superficial stuff. I always begin by sitting on the foam roller to get the trunk, which is your glutes. So if you're sitting on it like this, you can feel it kind of click over your butt bone. That's your ischial tuberosity and where your hamstring's attached into, right? You want to take that roll and go all the way into your low back, right? Into the false ribs, and then come back up. Now the glutes are not two-dimensional, they're three-dimensional. So think about like a slice, a quarter of an orange, right? A big slice of orange, and you want to hit the glute at every angle of that slice. So you start by sitting, right? A couple rolls, taking in really deep breaths through your nose, and then slowly exhaling out your mouth, and turning into a side position as you go along, right? This is pretty sped up. I actually go a lot slower because again, the glutes are really dense, so you want to take your time. But for the sake of this clinic, we're going to kind of speed things up a bit. Once you get into the sideline position, you might feel a bone that's poking out in front. That's your ASIS, your anterior superior iliac spine. It's where your hip flexors that go down your leg attach into. So you kind of want to rock over that. Again, my runners, if you have tight IT bands, you really want to get this area. Depending on how tight you are, this could feel pretty intense just using the foam roller. So again, go slow. You want to hit the glute, right? All the way down, butt bone into the false ribs. And I'm saying false ribs because the last three ribs at the bottom here don't actually attach directly into your spine. Okay. And then once you get into the sideline position, you find that bone and you rock over it like this. So it's like a back and forth motion. So that should take care of our glutes and the TFL. Now the other hip flexors in the front, these guys, like I said, these are your tanks, right? It's going to take a lot to get them to relax. So this is where your breath work is super important. I like to take a deep breath in through my nose for a count of 6, hold it for a count of 4, and then exhale out my mouth for a count of 6. That should activate your parasympathetic nervous system to help you rest and relax. Now hitting the quads, again, finding that bone in the front, the ASIS, you can place yourself right on top of that. Okay, don't be afraid to get right on top of the bone because that's where things attach into. So I have my foot turned in, right? There's a little internal rotation. I'm going to take that drag all the way down to the bottom of my knee and then back into my lower abs, okay? And then I'm going to start slowly turning my foot out, but you're going to do that as you glide up and down the foam roller, taking the glide all along the quad. So that takes care of the superficial muscles or the stuff on the outside. Now, using a tennis ball, where the hell did my tennis ball go? Here we go. This is your deep tissue tool, right? This is more focused pressure, more focused compression. So this is going to feel a lot more intense than gliding on the foam roller. Working those same areas, going into the glute, we start in a sideline position, right? You find the bone, the ASIS, you place the tennis ball lateral or just off to the side there, and then gently rock onto the tennis ball. So holding this position could feel really intense, again, depending on how tight you are. So here I like to do a little scooping motion. So think about kind of scooping your hips, so pushing your hips back and then scooping it forward and just rolling like this. The slower you go, the better. It might feel excruciating. You're like, whoa, Seth, I don't know, this hurts a lot. Or you might not feel anything because you're that tight and your body takes time to respond, okay? So go like a quarter of the speed at which I'm going, and you just scoop your hips forward and push your hips back. Take that glide all the way to the edge of the bone. Now, the reason why that's important is because the attachments, right, the Golgi tendons that the muscles attach into bone, if you work those Golgi tendons, the attachment points, the muscles will relax. So if you can find a good massage therapist that knows how to work your attachment points instead of hammering in with their elbow into your muscle tissue, you found a good one. So from here, you can take this glide all the way to the sacrum. So all the way to the butt bone in the middle, and then rocking back and forth, side to side like this. Okay. Don't forget to take those really big, deep breaths in through your nose and out your mouth. All right. Moving on to the rectus femoris, the muscle in the front. These muscles get super tight, really, really tight, and they're really powerful, and they can really pull you forward. What you want to do is find the ASIS. So when I work with my clients, they know what the ASIS is because this is a major bony landmark that we kind of use to navigate through the body, okay? So now just going to the inside of the ASIS, you're going to take that glide straight down the front of the knee with your foot turned in. Okay? That's going to look something like this. I'm going to place the ball to the inside of the ASIS, and that's going to push into my iliopsoas. So that's going to feel pretty intense. You just put a little bit of body weight into there. Again, take a couple of deep breaths. I have my foot turned in towards the center of my body. If you want to put a little more pressure, you can bring the opposite knee up, and it's called a froggy leg. So just hang out here with the ball in front of your hips. Again, take those nice deep breaths in through the nose, holding for 4 to 5 seconds, and then exhaling for 6. Once you start to feel it soften up, you can take that glide all the way down to the front of the knee, and then back up into the lower abs, okay? So I do that for the entire front of the leg, right? All the way down and then out to the side. When you hit the side here, there's going to be a lot of feedback. There's a lot of tension here that people just ignore because, again, the legs will not complain. These guys don't complain until it gets into your spine, basically your low back. When you have low back issues, that's when you know, oh shoot, something's going on with my hips. Okay. All right, so now that we've covered some compression, giving our muscles a nice hug, This whole routine should have taken you about like 15, 20 minutes to do. But we don't have all that time, so we're gonna move on. So after giving your muscle tissue a hug, we wanna stretch it out. And we're gonna do what's called fascial stretching or fascial stretching. Look at my notes here. All right, if you're at home, I want you to follow along with me so we can experience the difference when you're doing this right, okay? So we're gonna do a little test and just see how tight you are. So I want you to take a little step forward with your left leg. It doesn't have to be super exaggerated. It's literally just, boop, just like that, okay? You wanna keep your left leg straight, lock that knee out, and then allow your back leg to bend. Take the opposite hand, twist, and reach for the outside of the foot. Hold this position for 3 seconds. I like to take 3 to 4 deep breaths. You might feel it on the outside, or you might feel it in your undercarriage along the hamstring. It just depends on where you're tight, okay? Let's come on up. Let's do that one more time. So a little step forward with your left leg. Right, bend that back leg, take your hand, reach for the outside of the foot, and take a couple of deep breaths. Make sure you lock this knee out. I usually don't recommend that, but for this, we're gonna sacrifice that a little bit. Okay. And then for posterity, we're gonna do the same thing with the other side. I love doing this because it allows me to take in data about my body. Where do I feel stuff? What's working? What's not working? What wants to turn? What doesn't want to turn? So this is just your chance to have a nice conversation with your body to see what's going on. So now we're going to take a step forward with our right foot and allow your back knee to bend. Left hand to the outside of that right foot. Pause and hold. Lock this leg out. When you lock it out, you're kind of pushing your body away from the floor, or pushing your weight away from the floor, and you can feel where it's stretching. Again, 3 to 4 deep breaths. It might be really painful for some folks. Don't worry, you're not gonna snap anything. You're just really tight. So allow your breath to facilitate your stretch. All right, so that's our check-in point. Now we're going to do a couple of things to see if we can improve that tension, okay? A lying knee hug, super simple and underrated. Give yourself a hug. We're going to start laying on your back, okay? And then you're going to bring your knee into your chest and give it a nice squeeze. Again, 3 to 4 deep breaths. Allow your breath to be the release for your muscles. So this is putting some flexion into your iliopsoas, right? But you're actively holding this, so you're hugging yourself, okay? I do this 2 to 3 times. You release, come back in. And again, release, come back in. Okay, from here, we're gonna have a little bend in the leg. Allow the leg to drop across the body. I got some nice cracks going there. And this is gonna give our glutes a good stretch. So if you have posterior tilt, your piriformis could be tight. This is a nice stretch for that stabilizer, for that piriformis muscle.
Seth, do you think you could you just
tilt the
aim
screen
your
down?
camera? Just lift your camera just a little bit. Thanks.
Oop. I was wondering about that. Okay, can you see me okay?
That's perfect.
Great, all right. So again, bringing the knee in, and we went into this. You see this a lot with sports trainers, you know, personal trainers. This is a really good stretch, and it allows your lumbar spine or your low back to get a nice twist in. Okay. Of course, we want to do the same thing to the other side. 3 to 4 seconds here, a couple of deep breaths, release, come back in, and really hug yourself. Like hug yourself like you mean it. Don't like, don't be soft about it where you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna hold my leg. I mean, like squeeze it in, okay? Like leg, I love you, hips, I love you, and I want you to feel good. So I'm gonna hold you tight because you need it. Couple of deep breaths, release, and then we're gonna go into that twisting stretch here. If you want to get fancy, you can open up the shoulder on the other side. Okay. All right. That's step 1. Or like maybe step 1.5. This next part, you might want to grab a cushion for your knee. I'm old, so I'm going to do that. Can't be messing around with these heavy or these hard surfaces here. Okay. This is similar to the standing stretch that we did earlier. We're going to be targeting a similar fascial line, but doing it from a kneeling position. Okay. So here I have my left leg forward and my right leg back. I'm going to bring my hands down on each side of my foot in the front. Okay. We're going to drop the hip forward. So drop your right hip forward. Kind of shake your butt left to right. Do what feels good. Keep the weight in the front leg. Okay. 3 to 4 deep breaths. Maintaining the weight in this foot. Right. Make sure you keep this foot grounded. Now you're going to push back, round your back. Keep that foot right there. Getting really deep into the hamstrings. So again, coming forward, drop the hip in. 3 to 4 deep breaths. Speeding this up a little bit. And then pushing back. Trying to gain length in this leg. So I usually do 4 to 5 repetitions on each side. Okay. You just do the same thing on the other side. Right foot forward, left leg back. This is also called a 90-90 because you got 90 degrees of flexion in the back of the knee. Hands down on each side. Lunge forward, allow the front of the left hip to drop. Maintain your weight in the front foot. Push your weight back, round your back. And take a couple of deep breaths here. So you want to hold this for 3 to 4 breaths. And then you want to hold this for 3 to 4 breaths. And you repeat it 4 to 5 times. Okay. So there are our fascial stretches. I guess I should, I just talk about fascia as if everybody knows what that is. Fascia is a collagen webbing that runs through your entire body. We are now learning that it's a communication organ. So it responds to your environment and not through your nervous system. Okay, so not through your nerves. It responds through vibration. Okay, so it wraps around your muscles, it wraps around your bones, it wraps around muscle groups to make them work together. It's a really cool thing. So I'm going to share with you guys something that happened with me today, actually. Yesterday, I was extremely inactive. It's getting cold in New England. It was my rest day. I was just chilling and being a big, lazy lump. Okay, I worked from bed most of the day. And then today, I thought it would be a great idea to have a badass workout before the clinic, so I could feel awake. I made the mistake of not stretching my hips before I did my workout. So I warmed up on the rower, which is active flexion and active extension of my hip flexors. My body was so pissed. I went into lateral raises And that's where my sacrum snapped. It just like pulled, right? So there was excessive hip tension. And then I'm asking my body to stabilize. I'm asking my glutes, which are a part of the core muscles, to stabilize as I'm doing these raises. And that puts some torque on my sacrum. So before the clinic, I was in a lot of pain. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. It's exactly what you want. The one thing that really helped me when I was in a lot of pain and I could feel the pull in my sacrum. We're talking about this bone right here, right? This is your butt bone, your tailbone, and the sacrum. The glutes attached into that. So the thing that was most effective for me was doing a rear foot elevated stretch. So you can use a chair, you can use a box, whatever. You put the top of your foot on that box and you drive your knee down. As you're driving your knee down, you're thinking about bringing this knee up towards your face. So it's active stretching, right? We're really getting a nice deep stretch. And don't be afraid to turn the knee in and out, because then that way you'll get the adductors and all of those muscles that I showed you earlier in like slide 3 or 4. Okay. And that's it for the stretching. So just to summarize really quickly, we did the standing stretches, and if you followed along and actually did the stretches, let's just go back and revisit the standing fascial stretch. Okay, so let's just humor me and do this one more time. So go ahead and take a little step forward with your left leg. Take your right hand. Remember, the back leg is allowed to bend. The front leg stays locked out. You're going to twist and reach for the outside of the foot. See if it's a little bit less painful. See if you got a little bit more mobility there. And then we'll test the right side. So right foot forward, lock that knee out, back leg bends, left hand to the outside. And make sure you're putting all of your weight into the leg that is forward. So loading onto that front leg. I don't know about you, but that felt good for me. I feel a lot more mobile and my sacrum is less pissed at me. So I'm really glad that I did this clinic, or had all that happen. All right. So that's my talking portion, and then showing you guys how to take care of your hips with the foam roller and the tennis ball. Now, remember, when you feel tension in your body, you might want to stretch it, but try hugging it first. Think about compression, right? I know there's a lot of climbers that tune into this stuff. So let me just use this metaphor. Everyone has had experience with a kinky rope, right? You know that there's a lot of tension in that rope, and that's what creates the kink and the coil. Imagine that inside of your body. Would you continue to climb on a rope that has that much kink in it? Or would you want to work those kinks out, work that tension out of the rope and then use the rope? Okay. Before I take some Q&A from you guys, there's been 2 commonly asked questions amongst my client base that I will answer. The first is about a compact disc. So your vertebrae being pushed at weird angles into each other. What you can do about that is stretch. Do the fascial stretching that I showed you. When you push back, you're actually lengthening your lats and putting yourself into extension, and that provides some space. So I had a client who was just sitting on the couch because our homes are now our offices and everything else. So you're not moving a whole lot, right? So you can just sit and slump, and then that creates tension because your body's just holding on to that posture. So make sure you get up, get some water, move around, do some stretches that I showed you. The second most common issue with hips that I want to address is clicking. If you have hips that click, it means you're out of alignment. Think about your bones as the structure that holds you up. If something is out of alignment, it's going to buckle the structure, right? It's going to wear away at the gears, and it's going to warp the connections. So if you have clicking that's happening, make sure you activate your toes. Make sure that your toes don't just fall flat on the ground. You actually want to activate them, because when you activate your toes, the body is so beautifully designed, it takes care of itself, right? You want to activate your toes, and that automatically puts you into alignment. And clicking is kind of it's a complex issue. I would have to ask you where the clicking is happening, what your daily activity looks like, when did the clicking start? For people with fluctuating hormone levels throughout the month, that could be a worse issue than for people that don't have fluctuating hormones or a menstrual cycle, right? So hopefully that answers some of the question. All right, let's go into some Q&A. How does fascia become unhealthy like that? Well, hydration is key, right? It's about nutrition and it's about hydration. How supple is your muscle tissue? How much blood flow are you getting into the area? If something's tight, we're not going to get a lot of blood flow into that area, right? If you're tight and you're not getting circulation that moves properly through your body, that feeds into your tissue, that's how fascia can become unhealthy. And it's a cumulative thing. You don't just wake up one day and it's like, boom, I got unhealthy fascia. This is over the course of your life. So what you put into your body matters, right? I hope I answered that well enough. Should you roll out tight hips every day? Yes. Again, cumulative, right? Tension is cumulative. It doesn't, you don't just wake up one day. I have so many people that have come to me for massage therapy and they're like, I just woke up and like it started hurting, or I woke up and like I was in pain. That's a lie. It doesn't just happen out of nowhere, okay? Acute injuries might, that might be the issue, right? If you like had sudden impact or like a trip or something like that, that might be the case, but your body gives you signs. You might not be good at listening to those signs. And then what I've learned is that it's not that you want to ignore your pain, it's that most people don't know what to do about it. They're like, well, what do I do if I have tight hips? You do some of the foam rolling, you do some of the self-care that I just showed you. If you don't have a foam roller or a tennis ball, another great way to activate your parasympathetic nervous system is taking a bath. Submerging yourself in warm water kind of recreates being back in the womb, and that allows for you to relax. Okay. Chronic SI joint dysfunction. If you have chronic sacroiliac, that's what the SI stands for, your sacral iliac, that is here. I just talked about having pain here. And my pain came because my hip flexors pulled on the front, right? When they pull on the front, it provides, or it creates an anterior tilt, and you see how that kind of then pulls on the back. So if you have chronic SI joint dysfunction, I would recommend two things. Roll your hips out, right, to get them nice and supple. And then you want to strength train or do stabilizing exercises. A really easy one is taking a band. I think a lot of people have these. You take a band and you place them around the outside of your knees, and you do sidewalks like this. Really simple. Side to side, maybe 5 to 10 steps to the right, 5 to 10 steps to the left, 3 times, and that should strengthen your stabilizers enough. Okay. Chronic psoas issues. If you have a chronic psoas issue, you got to really think about how much stress is occurring in your life, right? Because the psoas is an emotional muscle. There's actually a book called The Psoas, The Emotional Muscle. That's the title. I highly recommend it. It's known as the emotional muscle because, like I mentioned earlier, it is a huge muscle deep inside of our bodies. It's the first thing that develops, and it reflexes. It is our fear response. When we are scared, it'll lock in. So what you want to do is, number one, address your stress levels. That's the first thing. Number two, think about how much are you sitting throughout the day, and what are you doing to counter your stress? Are you taking a bath? Are you walking? Are you exercising? Are you actively opening up your hips? Taking a yoga class, I highly recommend that, and doing some of the soft tissue release and the foam rolling that we did earlier. If you have chronic issues, you definitely want to address it, and there's hope, right? There's hope. You don't think that there's like not hope because you're in pain. You can take control of your body, and you can start addressing that chronic issue today, so that when you're 70 and 80 years old, you can still do the awesome things that you love to do. Recovery for a strained hip flexor. Okay. Recovery for a strained hip flexor. If your hip flexor is strained, it means it's weak. I would recommend laying off any flexion exercises. So flexion is this. Okay. And work on actually strengthening your lower core. So an easy way to strengthen your lower core is by doing dead bug heel taps. This is something I do in class all the time. I'm going to show you the exercise right now because it's so easy. You want to start laying on your back, right? Round your back, bring your feet off the ground. Make sure your low back doesn't come off, right? You don't want any space behind your low back. Starting with this rounded position, you just do heel taps like this. 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 5 rounds, and that'll start developing your lower abs so that your psoas can take a break from holding and your lower abs can take over. Okay? What do I mean by activate my toes? Okay, activating your toes. This is a little bit of a complex one. Your toes and your hands have the most proprioceptive nerves, so it tells you what's going on in space. It tells you what's going on with your environment. Unfortunately, we've been put into a cast. So imagine if you had your arm in a cast for 6 months to a year, you start to lose the muscle development in that arm, right? Because there's something else supporting it. It's the same thing with your shoes. When we wear shoes, and most people have to wear shoes or are put in shoes since being a toddler. So we don't have to grasp for the ground anymore, right? Our toes don't give us that feedback because they're in shoes. So it's like a cast for your foot, and then it just gets lazy. So you actually want to pretend like you're grasping for grass, or you can take a towel and put it underneath your foot and then pull the towel in with your toes. And that'll start activating each digit and making your arches a lot stronger. Flat feet mean that everything buckle, okay? So activate your toes, give you stronger feet, give you better feedback. I think we got time for a couple more. A foot injury 5 years ago, limping for a bit, caused to have an imbalance in the hips. That's expected. And tension on the right leg, so there's pronation. Strengthen the hips and glutes, but how can I release that tension? Would the stretches you told us be helpful? Yes. So if you start limping and your other leg has to take over, or there's a compensation pattern, it's really hard to undo that pattern, right? 5 years ago, that really has sunk in. I would highly recommend going to see a massage therapist, so then you're not actively releasing that muscle tissue. It'll be a passive thing. It'll be a good reset button, you know? So I would highly recommend going to see a really good massage therapist or a skilled massage therapist. Ask them about their experience and let them know what happened. Strengthening the glutes, I would actually maybe like not work on strengthening and work on releasing the tension first. So lots of foam rolling, tennis ball stuff, seeing a massage therapist, and then doing stretches. Any stretches you could recommend for lengthening the psoas? You have an athlete that's strong enough to do front levers, but lacks the mobility to do leg raises while keeping legs straight. Okay. Yeah. So again, you're looking at strong enough to do front levers. I'd have to look at how the athlete is doing the front levers, because you can kind of tell through their alignment what's working and what's not. They could be so strong in the upper body that pulls them up into the lever, and then not have any of the lower ab, lower core strength that I just showed you. So doing the heel taps, doing the dead bug heel taps to strengthen this. But if you have mobility issues, you got to hit the rectus femoris. You got to hit the front of the quad that goes from the top of the hip, this ASIS, all the way down to the top of the knee, and have them roll that out for a whole minute. Work out that tension, and that should help. You mentioned changing the relationship with pain earlier, but also compressing damaged muscles and not stretching them. I was wondering if it's good to continue to work on this kind of stretching in rehab physio, work through the pain that is associated with strains and sprains as opposed to just tight muscle. That's a tough one. If you have injured tissue, you don't want to, if you have injured tissue, you don't want to work directly on the tissue, but you want to work around it as much as you can, because everything around it is going to tighten up to protect that area that's damaged, okay? So you want to keep everything around it supple, look a joint up, look a joint down, right? So always look above the injured site and then below the injured site, and see what you can do to make sure that those places stay mobile. You know, give them massage in those areas, and that'll be great, because then you'll also increase blood flow into the injured site. So you can absolutely work around an impact site or an injury site, but not directly on as it's healing. Yes, Shakira was absolutely right. Hips don't lie. They tell you exactly what's going on with your body. You just do a bad job of listening. If you have tightness in your groin from running, easy one is to actually stretch. And if it's your groin, you got to look at your gait. You got to look at how you're coming down and where you're driving from. Most likely it's really quad intensive, and I would recommend actually doing some split squats and targeting your glutes, so you can propel yourself with your glutes versus the front of your legs. As a runner, would you roll your hips out pre or post run? Depends on what your objective is. There's nothing wrong with doing 5 minutes pre-run and then 5 minutes post-run. If you do it pre-run, guaranteed you'll probably be more mobile and get a better time. If you do it post-run, you'll recover faster. So you really can't lose. You could do 5 minutes and like sandwich your run in between. Great. You're awesome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for, being interested enough to take care of yourself. The one thing I really love doing is educating people so you can take control of your body. right? I know that people just, they don't want to slack off. They don't want to hurt. They don't want to feel bad. They just don't know what to do about it. So I'm really hoping that this information is helpful in you feeling empowered enough to take care of the aches and pains that you feel. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this has been helpful. And I do work with folks remotely. You can inquire through my website. Yeah. I'll hand it over to you, Eli.
Still sitting on the ground from doing the stuff.
That's great.
This was awesome. Really loved it. And everyone, thanks for participating and asking a bunch of questions. This was fantastic. We will be sending an email out tomorrow with the recording of this, so you can keep on doing it over and over with Piseth's help and dial in some of the anatomy stuff that she discussed as well. I know she flew through a bunch of stuff, but we'll slow this down in your everyday practice, and I think you'll find a huge benefit from it. And as Piseth mentioned, she does work with clients individually. I know she does have her plate is quite full, but we'll send out, contact information so that you can find out more information from her about, what she provides as far as services and so forth. You guys, thanks so much for participating. Piseth, huge thank you, all the love, and everybody have a great day and stay mobile.
See you, everyone.